and you will see the level of dishonesty that prevails in this country. And they are being rewarded by the government now by writing off the taxes and the penalties that they should have paid for not complying with the law. People in other jurisdictions don't do this to get locked up. Let's face the courts. They're trying to go get a visit, but they can't get a visit, no, because Brown ain't there to watch them. But we in this country, far from enforcing the law and make sure these people pay, we're writing it off. So that is hurtful. That is hurtful as to the people who are actually paying the taxes in this country. The people who fight and struggle. You know, I'll tell you something. When my father, I use him as an example. He's now dead. But he had a small property, very small. And he's home sitting down, and the postman comes and hand him the tax bill. And the old man take the tax bill and go and catch the bus. He said, I'm going to hold down and pay the bill. And wait. That's what my father used to do. The poor people would go and pay the taxes. But the people who got money and got friends and people who can afford to contribute to political campaigns are getting write-offs because they might want some more money the next time around. This is wrong, sir. Should never happen. No right-thinking administration should think to write off these taxes. They are collectible. Not all might not be collectible because some of them might have died, some of them might have fallen on real hard times, but not all. And each case should go on its merit. And some of these people don't need relief, they need jail. But we can't lock up our kith and kin. That is the problem. Well, we are on 67, Section 67 of the Income Tax Act. There's a 67(1), if I remember correctly, where if you are owed money and you're seeking a refund, but you file late, they hit you for $500. That's unfair too. It ain't that you owe the government any money, no, the government owe you. But somehow you ain't get around to filing on time, and they charge you a penalty of $500. But you reckoning them from people who filing late, but give here the taxes that people refuse to pay. Something is awfully wrong with government's thinking in this area of taxes. I am very sorry, sir, that I cannot, in all conscience, support these measures because they are punitive on the people who can least afford to pay taxes in this country. The people who can afford to pay are getting write-offs. The people who, the average fellow who voted, ain't got no friends now. It is the people who pay the campaign contributions that got friends now and who would seek to get their benefits now in government largesse with our money. We're giving away our money at a time when we can't afford it. Mr. President, it is hurtful that a Barbados Labour Party administration, an administration that boasts of people like Grantley Adams, Tom Adams, Bruce St. John, yourself, could have sunk to this level where they have now become the oppressors, where they are actually now taking advantage of the people who they were set up to represent. I don't understand what's happening in this country. But somebody needs to shake this administration and tell them, look, wake up. What nonsense you're doing? You're hurting the people who you have vowed to represent. And I'm not talking only about the layoffs, I'm talking about every action that you've taken so far, you know. Listen, and know what bothers me too. Yeah, that you send home these people, and then you're talking about, you can get them a little relief, and you can have some committee that can check out the business and things. That's really well for the department. But you know what? That committee now will be people who are some of your friends who will get a little pick here. You know, something is wrong. Something is awfully wrong in this country, and the government ain't got the foresight to see it. I don't know if it is because we have these people who cannot tie their laces. They're reading books and don't understand that this country, we are not only dealing with numbers in terms of dollars and cents. We are dealing with people who got children. And we are sending a lot of these children to go stay hungry at night because of the policies of this government. Sir, I am very sorry that the Barbados Labour Party has sunk to this level. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you. I next recognize Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise, I admit, unsure, Mr. President, of whether I should laugh or whether I should cry. Because, Mr. President, I think we have just had two of the truest statements made so far in the entire duration of this sitting of the Senate made a few moments ago. Mr. President, I made a point to write them down. And they are, I don't understand. That is a truth, Mr. President. Senator Franklin absolutely, demonstratively does not understand. And so he has admitted for all the nation to hear that he does not understand, and I wish to second that point. Secondly, he's also announced for the nation to hear that he's not good with maths yet. And I wish to also second that assertion because, Mr. President, we have all been here. We've sat in this session for the last 6, 7 months. We've lived in this country for the last decade. Unless you admit that you do not understand and you are not good with the math, perhaps what I can consider to be the most rambling of his submissions yet to date would not have graced the floor of the Senate. Mr. President, we are here in a place where no Barbadian wants to be. We are here in an administration signed up for a job that no amount of money could pay some people to take because it is one of the most difficult things to do. We are here in an administration making decisions that I know I've heard ministers say with my own 2 ears, they would rather not sleep at night sometimes because it is difficult to be here. We are here making decisions about layoffs, tax bans, income tax changes, corporate tax changes, because we are in a moment in time where there are no other choices. And it is only if you do not understand the maths of this that you can make a submission like what we just heard from the floor of the Senate, Mr. President. The fact of the matter is that the country's broke. We have no money. We cannot pay our bills on time, and hence that is where we were in June of 2018. That is where we found ourselves as a nation, Mr. President. We could not pay our bills. We weren't talking about being able to do fancy infrastructural issue matters. We weren't talking about being able to do transformational projects. We were talking about the mundane, rudimentary, day-to-day aspects of running a country, which this administration found itself unable to do. The government does not have any shops down in town. The government doesn't own any companies, except those which are the government's, the state-owned enterprises and entities like the Barbados Port and the Grand Islands International Airport. I say that I may know a few things about one of those entities. But the government earns its revenues to provide services to the people of this country by taxes. And if the consolidated fund and the treasury of this country is unable to meet the needs of the government and provide us with the funds to pay our bills, then they have to be derived from taxes. And it is no pleasure. The government of Barbados, under the Barbados Labour Party administration, takes absolutely no pleasure in introducing a level of taxation that no one wants to sit under. Surely, the level of taxes that I look at when I see it coming out of my monthly salary, I want to bawl. I am not happy with the level of taxation that I am paying. I don't think anybody in this room is. But I pay it because I'm a proud Barbadian. I pay it because I did not just drop here out of Mars suddenly today, and I don't know what happened in this country in the last 10 years. I know what happened, and I can count with a calculator and without. I understand why we are here. I understand why these decisions are being taken. And it is fine for us to get in here and pomp a set, and somehow in the midst of our ramblings, the media finds some soundbite to run with, and that becomes the narrative that comes out of the Senate. But that is not the reality of what is happening here. In here is more about is about more than the grandstanding that we tend to be subjected to on a weekly basis. This is a matter of substance. People are going home and feeling real pain. Not just those that are going home, but those that are sending home. Why? Because the government has to be able to pay its bills. And we have to be responsible in this House, Mr. President. We have to stop where we're going. And so fine, I accept. You don't understand. If you don't understand, perhaps what should have happened should have been that in the absence of your opposition colleague, we should have deferred, because you really demonstrated that you don't understand. In the absence of an economist and somebody who understands development and who would have been able to contextualize their submission, perhaps we should have given this one a pass. Mr. President, I use an example here to say just how badly you don't understand. We even heard the case about Barbados rolling over and playing nice to have your tummy rubbed. And we had the example of the Antigua case. Now, Mr. President, in 2004 or somewhere thereabouts, this is now 12 years that Antigua is fighting this international gaming case against the World Trade Organization. This has nothing to do with taxation. It has nothing to do with domestic policy. This is about international trade and cross-border trade, and a decision made by the United States under its own domestic legislation to bar companies involved in online gaming from being able to engage in cross-border transactions, including things like poker. What does that have to do with this debate, Mr. President? It is a demonstration that you don't understand. We're just rambling on and misleading the public of this country. People are in a position where we have a responsibility to educate. These are a number of tax measures, a number of bans that are being dealt with, and a number of measures that are being introduced and proposed for reform. And in the short term, we will soon see, as has been announced by the government, coming out to the Ministry of Finance, that imminently there's going to be a comprehensive reform of our entire tax infrastructure, for the simple reason that going at these things over many years has created a situation where there's absolutely no alternative but to take the bull by the horn and look at it comprehensively and in a macro way. We cannot take a piecemeal approach anymore, and so the government has already announced that this is what it is going to do. We're talking about scattershot policy, Mr. President. Mr. President, I didn't intend to speak on this matter because I admit openly that financial matters are not my strength. But I could not remain seated, Mr. President, and have going out into the public space that which we just heard. We had, just a few weeks ago, an extensive discussion about the way in which public policy was developed. We had, for the very first time, as part of the restructuring, a volume of information, 44 pages long, of a survey put out on SurveyMonkey for the Barbadian public to say, here is what we should do with some of our institutions. These are the monies that are allocated to these institutions. This is what they're called to do. This is what is going to salaries and wages, and this is what is left for projects and programs. And in many instances, we found that there was very little money for projects and programs. Most of the funds were going in these instances to salaries and wages, and they were not delivering. Barbadians spoke in resounding fashion about how they saw us being able to rationalize that. The government took that into account. The government hired the brightest and the best, including those that came from Washington in the international institutions. They know, they understand, and they can do the math. And they have not developed any scattershot policy. And as a testimony to the fact that there is no scattershot policy, Barbados, for the first time in 9 years, has had an upgrade. For the first time. We have had the first upgrade in 9 years. We have just had the IMF concluded mission a few weeks ago where they gave, I think the article in the newspaper was, they gave Barbados high marks for its restructuring program. There's no scattershot policy here. We're talking about going after those who came before. Mr. President, I want to share a story with you. A few weeks ago, I was coming home. I was on an airline, on an aircraft, and I was sitting next to a colleague that I knew from before from an international development organization. And Mr. President, I think I've shared this with one of my colleagues in here. It broke my heart, Mr. President. It broke my heart because I'm sitting next to this non-Barbadian international person who has watched Barbados for the last decade and who understands exactly what we're dealing with and why we're doing it. And I said to them, you know, Barbados has so much potential in a particular area. And what has happened in this area has been very unfortunate. And you know what they said to me, Mr. President? They said to me, let me take a sip of water. Every time I tell this story, I pause. Thank you, Mr. President. They said to me, what happened in Barbados is not unfortunate, Lisa. You heard, you understood who I said I was sitting next to on a plane. One of these, I think the second in one of our international organizations dealing with development financing. They said what happened in Barbados in the last 10 years is not unfortunate. It is criminal. That is what they said. This is not one of us. They weren't a member of the Barbados Labour Party. They weren't a member of any party. They were an outsider looking on at us. And they said when we examined the figures and the debt figures for Barbados, and we looked at your debt, and what your revenues look like and your tax take, where the money was coming from in terms of revenues, we can't figure out where the money went. So if outsiders monitoring Barbados can say to us that they don't know where the money went, you mean that we who live out here don't know neither? No, Mr. President, we know. We know why we are here. We know why this tax measure is now before us. We know why the government needs to increase revenues, and it brings the government no pleasure to be able to have to increase taxes. But what I will say is this, Mr. President, our Prime Minister has said repeatedly that the burden is to be shared by all. She has said that we all hold a share in this. This is not rich versus poor, the haves versus have-nots. And if you can do the math, certainly you see, Mr. President, that there were two administrations between 1968 and 2000, and the Barbados Labour Party surely is not in the business of protecting its own because both administrations were in power between 1968 and 2000. So this nonsense about kith and kin mathematically does not add up, Mr. President. We have to stop this. If we don't have anything to say, Mr. President, let's just not. So I want to say, in conclusion, Mr. President, because as I said at the very beginning, I stood only because I just could not allow that which was put out in the public space to continue. But these are important measures. These are measures that those of us who can do the math and who do understand have a clear understanding of why they are here, what they hope to accomplish, what the government is hoping to do. As a result of these policies, we understand that they're not scattershot policies. We understand that there's a question as it relates to accounting methodologies that somehow you cannot still have on your books receivables that date as far back as 1968 and all the way back there, and the government has to be able to take some measure to be able to determine whether or not these monies are in fact possibly still being able to be recovered or not, and move on from there. The government has done so. We have made a decision and we have been able to move on, and I wish to call on all of my colleagues to support these measures in the interest of Barbados. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Comments I recognize Tony Moore. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. After hearing the senator before me, I wonder what's coming my way for some of the thoughts that I wish to share. But, Mr. President, this bill before us must be examined within the context of its overall impact on the aggregate economy, the overall impact on spending, and the overall impact on taxation. Taking account of other impositions, some recent and some not so recent. We have had the health levy. We've had the garbage tax. We've had VAT on online purchases, tax for online use of credit cards, removal of mortgage interest benefit to taxpayers. This rate, the new rate and band, might be pushing those at the floor of what may be regarded by some as a middle class into a situation where they find themselves barely struggling to make ends meet. This bill potentially removes an extra $150, if my math is correct. This bill potentially removes at least $150 from the disposable income of those who are close to that $50,000 band per year. A bad situation for some may have become compounded too by the recent public sector retrenchment, where a spouse or another household member who's now on the breadline has increased the responsibility of a household member who is still working to meet that household's debt. And if that person is within that 50,000 region, which is less than the maximum insurable earnings, that person finds themselves with an added burden of a tax measure that reduces disposable income before the other taxes are introduced. I support what the acting leader of government business in the Senate posited when she said that it is important for everybody to share the burden, and so taking more, and I'm paraphrasing of course, taking a bit more from those who have more makes sense within the circumstance. And I would support that too. And there will always be discussion around what is an appropriate floor for agreement. What is before us is a band of $50,000 that carry the high, $50,000 and above that carries the highest tax rate. $50,000 annually divided by 12. It's less than $4,500. It's in the region of $4,200 and something dollars a month. Within our context and within the situation that I sought to have us visualize, the aggregate economy and the different demands that are being imposed, $4,200, $4,300 really isn't a lot. So that when in another place this introduction of a new tax ban was being contemplated, I was supporting the submissions of those who felt that $75,000 as a floor would make good sense. And the counter we had to that is when the math was done, that a taxation on those $75,000 and above would not yield the amount that dropping that floor to $50,000 would yield. And I guess I could understand it within the context of pure mathematics. But in the context of what real people have to be dealing with on an everyday basis, and within the context of all the other measures that confront real people on an everyday basis, I could see the challenges with this $50,000 floor. We have a situation right now where the garbage and the sanitation tax, the GSC is not performing or is underperforming. And that is because if a person has $50, a person can only spend within what that allows for, $50 or less. Unless you're Ching Ching Charlie that can try to make $1 out of 50 cents. So the situation is that where a person has to pay a water bill and has to pay a GSC and can only allocate $50 in that direction, they're still only allocating $50. So one of two things is going to happen. Either the garbage tax is going to be compromised, or that is going to be satisfied and water bills are going to become an issue, which is happening. But I digress. A bad situation for some, I am saying, has become worse. And it should not be difficult for us to understand how, in a very short time, this situation, within the last 6 months, it shouldn't be difficult for us to accept, even though we will contextualize where we are, why many feel that bad has become worse. And why the bill that we are contemplating would be regarded as a move that would seek to obliterate the middle class of Barbados. Yes, we understand the situation, the fiscal situation that our country has been put in. Apportioning no responsibility, but I'm sure all of us understanding where responsibility for our fiscal situation lies. The vice-like grip on a country that was forced, at least formally, to submit to the IMF. I don't need to go very far to convey that there is much to have genuine concern over. Overshadowing or perhaps even compounding these concerns is the tremendous doubt that there is regarding our current system of tax administration. Questions that have to be asked of our current system of tax administration. Is there a genuine effort being made to collect taxes that are owed? Are people paying taxes at the correct rates? Is there really a need for greater tax imposition, or should there be greater emphasis being placed on pursuing arrears or getting people to pay who are now not paying? All of these are questions that seem simple enough, and questions that are simple enough that answers should be provided for. But a big part of the problem we face is that simple questions like these don't seem to have answers, or answers that can be readily provided by the institutions that should be providing them, like the Barbados Revenue Authority. It is regrettable that under the existing method of tax administration, we have had, and I'm saying we, being a member in another forum, when raising similar questions, have had to be confronted with landslide answers. And by landslide answers, I'm saying that outstanding arrears, for instance, at one point in a meeting was in the region of $1 billion. Then we found in the same meeting that figure to be moving downward until the figure reached about $300 million. And that is referring to outstanding taxes. Now, if we are under a system of administration where there is no clear answer that can give direction of where we are as it relates to arrears, and therefore how we can go about collecting those arrears, then you could imagine the tremendous challenge that we were faced with. A challenge, therefore, that saw as a reasonable position a resort to increasing taxes on a citizenry that was already overburdened. Mr. President, I submit that a lack of proper tax administration has been more than a contributor to the overtaxing, the overstretching, the overburdening of taxpayers who continue to suffer on. With that said, government must move with greater urgency to unravel the untidiness which exists. Yes, we are pleased to hear that there is a move afoot to correct it. But how frequently have the citizens of Barbados heard that there's a move afoot to do things? We want to see action. We cannot be shooting in the dark continually in circumstances where undue hardship is being imposed on a set of people who really can't take anymore. There was a point in time where a few months ago I was saying that citizens can't take much more. But now I think that we are all aware that citizens are at a point where they cannot take anymore. I also want to suggest that there seems now to be a growing trend away from formal employment to informal employment. Now, we could couch it in all the cushy terms that there are. We can couch it within the language of entrepreneurship. But I had the unfortunate experience sitting recently in some retrenchment discussions. Seems to have taken over my life in the past 2 months, honestly. Sitting in those discussions and hearing admission that we need these positions to continue on as an entity. What we don't need is to keep these positions in formal employment, because the reality is we just cannot afford it. So instead of contracts of service, we would now be looking to go in the direction of contracts for service. So if I need a general secretary who is engaged under a contract of service, I could use that, that's safe. No mind what the salmon talk retriever says. But if I need a general secretary that is engaged under a contract of service, and I now want to engage that general secretary under a contract for service, presumably there has to be a cost-saving element involved. So the contract for service now has to be coming at a lower cost to make it beneficial than the contract of service. Now, if we are saying we need the positions and we will be willing to consider people who are currently here to come back and work on the contracts for service, which presumably are coming at a lower cost, it means that we are forcing these people into a situation of entrepreneurship, yes, but also informal employment. Why do I say that? The characteristic of informal employment is that it's generally characterized by the fact that you don't pay taxes, you don't meet other statutory obligations, and you don't have the benefit of social security. Now, we can pretend that government will not engage people who are not meeting their statutory obligations. And I say pretend because many of us know that that is a fact. Many of us know of situations where governments of Barbados have engaged entities to provide contracts for service or for services where these entities were not MIS compliant, they were not paying income taxes, but either the price they were offering was right, or Senator Wiggins, they had connections. So when we put people, or when we promote this entrepreneurship in the name of cost savings, that brings with it a move from formal to informal employment, what we are doing is removing the statutory or reducing the payments that could be met through statutory obligations. Because we are cutting the numbers in formal employment, that's where the taxes are supposed to be sure, and we are expanding those numbers in informal employment where we already have a challenge tracking whether statutory obligations are made or not. I say, therefore, that unless there is an overhaul of our tax administration system, where we are now and what we are debating is likely to be a position that we revisit again soon, and likely to be a position that is made even worse. So I say we have to move beyond the rhetoric, and when we talk about action, I hope the government in its contemplation isn't seeing that they're moving now to overhaul the tax administration system, and that's going to be another study, because I think in Barbados we are studied out. We have to move to implementation. So yes, our tax system is troubled, and there's need for urgent reform. We need, as citizens, to be confident that there is fair distribution of the benefits and burdens within the tax system. We need to ensure that spending from tax collection is balanced between direct and indirect taxes. By the direct taxes, of course, the income tax, the corporation tax, and by the indirect, the fuel tax and the GST. We need to make sure that these go to productive use, where we, the people, can see that they are improving our livelihood and that the economy as a whole is doing better. With this said, Deputy President, we welcome the application of simple interest rather than compound interest, and the write-off of taxes between 1968 and 2000. Now, I am one that is very convinced that the write-off up to 2000 was necessary anyhow, because if we can provide the simple answers to where we are within the last 5 years, for sure, we can be providing accurate answers for where we were 50 years ago. So that write-off was a necessary one. We welcome it nonetheless. We also welcome the conditional waiver of penalties and interest for the periods between 2001 and 2017. Where am I going? Am I supporting the measures? Am I not supporting the measures? I'm constrained to support the measures because to do so would be to support a system that is burdensome on people like me, the middle class, at the lower end, and people who are in the lower income brackets as well. But as a citizen of Barbados who, like others, have been hearing that there are alternatives, but who have not been seen or who has not been shown where those better options reside, I can only impress on the government of the day to ensure that these measures that they are implementing, along with the plans to develop our system of tax administration within another 18 months to 2 years, I can only hope that they yield the desired results, and to assure them that this Senate, not only this Honourable Chamber, but other agencies will be looking on to see where we are slipping back or not making the progress that we say that we would be pursuing. Deputy Chairman, with this submission, I am obliged.
Senator Adams.
Thank you, Deputy President. Some years ago, I saw an interview, and I was reminded of that earlier by Senator Franklin's presentation. I saw an interview with Tony Benn, who was a British parliamentarian, and he was describing his relationship with the press. And he said, you know, it doesn't matter what I do, they find a negative light to cast it in. I can imagine, this is him now, I can imagine walking along the riverbank, seeing a small child, a small girl, drowning in the river, jumping in, saving her, and the next day seeing a headline, Tony Benn caught frolicking in the river with an underage girl. I cannot understand how this government could be accused of a scattergun, I believe that was the word, a scattergun approach, scattershot. Thank you, a scattershot approach. I think that this bill is one of many that together fit, they dovetail neatly into what's been amply ventilated in the press, a stabilization, recovery, and transformation program. Why are we here? I thought that we heard a great explanation from more than one senator, in fact, as to how we got into this place. And a lot of it is to do with an incoherence of economic policy over the last few years, where, in fact, I think that accusation could have been fairly applied. Scattershot approach. Now we're looking at a situation where we have to find $300 million, and that is prompting a lot of the points that were made by Senator Moore over there. And I think I agree with quite a few of them in terms of how do you improve efficiency in the tax collection system. Certainly I agree with the points made about the write-offs. Sometimes it's not even just a question of those receivables being owed. It's a question of, do we have the information to back up? How can you chase it down? And there are quite a few studies that show also that these kind of waivers and amnesties have a net positive effect. So I liked her presentation. I thought that the Tony Benn interpretation did apply to a lot of what Senator Franklin said. And really, I'd like to cast the context again here that we're sitting in. We're trying to move from a place where we've had long stretches in the past where policy was incoherent when it came to economic policy. There is a program in place to fix that. What strikes me sometimes when we're in here talking almost in isolation, slightly out of context, is that we do ignore those things. If we continue to do what was done in the past, we are only ignoring that exhortation in our own national anthem to be firm craftsmen of our own fate. And we have a chance here. I mean, I know everybody, it is a critical situation. The public is worried, I'm worried, senators are worried, ministers in the other place and other MPs are also concerned. But what we really have before us is a huge opportunity, not only to stabilize and to put in place a recovery, but also to transform. I mean, right now, I think an apt description, we don't even need to delve that far. We can just look at the position we were in until very recently in terms of the sovereign rating system. We were in the bowels, right down at the bottom there, with only people like Venezuela for company. And until very recently, that's a frightening place to be if you look at what's going on in Venezuela. Fortunately, in Barbados, we have a social partnership, I think, that has spared us a lot of the potential catastrophe that could have been visited upon us, that is evident down in Caracas and other places in Venezuela. But here, to move out of that, we've already begun. S&P, for example, who downgraded us on the announcement of the debt restructuring, they downgraded us 2 notches. When they announced the upgrade, it was a 6-notch upgrade. Okay, it was only on domestic paper, but it's a start. It's a signal that we are going on the right track. And by going on the right track, what does that mean? That really means establishing credibility and establishing confidence. if you do not have a coherent economic program, of which this bill is a part, you cannot instill those things both in the minds of citizens and in the minds of investors. I really echo the dislike of having to pay higher tax. Who doesn't? But it's something that if we don't do, we can just go back down into where we were next to the Venezuelans of the world and try and be everybody's friend and try and take the easy path out, and we won't find it. What we're really trying to do is to move towards a position where we are craftsmen of our own fate. In terms of the transformation part of that economic plan, because we're right in the midst now, I say, in the border between stabilization and hopefully the beginnings of green shoots of a recovery. But in terms of the transformation, to do that, we have to have sound public finances. This is part of it. It's painful, but it is necessary. The kind of programs that the Prime Minister has spoken of, they touch health, they touch education, they touch infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and they also touch things like digital transformation. If we want to get to a place, and over lunch, some of the senators were talking about the impact of going to the right school, how important that is. But if over lunch we want to put in, not over lunch, if in the future we want to put in place programs like Top Schools, where we are trying to ensure that it does not matter which school you went to, you and your child have the same access to a quality education no matter where you are in the country. If we want to bolster that so that people come out of schools with better qualifications, so that they're able to benefit from a program like the First Jobs program, where you're really trying to make dents in persistently high levels of youth unemployment. Those are transformational things, but to do them, you have to have public finances on a sound footing. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. To get to the transformation stage, just to recap quickly, and to put in place some of the ambitious programs that the government has planned, like Top Schools or First Jobs, or continuing to rehabilitate the physical infrastructure. To get there, we have to get through what we're doing right now. Some of those gains can be made concurrently. Senator McConney, who is in charge of digital transformation for the part of a program that really has its tentacles all the way through government, will know as well as I do, because I work in digital payments, that some of the structural changes that can be made to the advantage of government, to the advantage of reducing cost in government and throughout the economy are quite profound. There, to give you one example of that, there are studies that have been undertaken, not by governments, but by MasterCard, in the example I'm going to cite, that show just transforming, moving a third of all payments that take place in cash to digital form can boost gross domestic product by up to 3 points over a 4-year period. So there are things like that that change the fundamental structure of economy, but that cost money, that we have to finance and find ways to do it. This bill, income tax, we're going to talk about the fuel tax later on, and the allusions that Senator Franklin made to the changes in the international business sector. These are all examples of opportunities, but also necessary steps for us. I mentioned a moment ago, and I profoundly believe it, that we're going through something that's painful, but it's a huge opportunity for us to change the structure of the country, to change the way we do business, and to do what really we're all here for, which is to make lives richer, more fulfilling, easier, but in a permanent way, not in a cyclical way that once we fix this, we go back to the old style. We don't fix some of the things that Senator Moore was talking about, efficiencies in tax collection, that we do nothing with the school system or the education system. All of those are fundamental things that have to be done. The only way to do them is to get through and pass legislation such as this bill before us. I mentioned a moment ago, I referenced the Standard & Poor's upgrade. Now, for people like me who like to read those things, there's a quote in there where they say, policy making in recent years has been slow to respond to fiscal and economic challenges. Well, there's a lot of information buried in there. Some of it touches on the examples of whose fault it is we are where we are. But really what it's saying there is we have been in a long cycle of inertia, a long cycle where we're not really trying to fix very fundamental problems, but now we have a chance to do so. Some of the advantages that we have in this country are that we're small. That used to be a disadvantage for some industries. That killed us when it came to the changes around sugar production. There was a time when you were small, it was great to be near a port, and islands were the kings of sugar production. Then with the transportation revolution, that all changed as places like Cuba and Brazil were opened up for vast productions. But here, to implement something like a digital transformation in a small country is far easier than doing it in a place with a vast geography. To put in place programs that, I mentioned first jobs or top schools. These are all things that we should be able to do more easily than in a country that is not that doesn't have a social partnership, for example, like Venezuela, or in a large country that has a population that is far less homogeneous than ours. So we have advantages in the task that's sitting before us. I'm very hopeful, although this is a painful process. As I say, I think that we have a chance to become craftsmen of our fate, to get through this pain, to seize the opportunities, to get to a better and permanently better place than we've been in the past. We've probably all heard that expression, don't waste a crisis. This is a crisis, this is a chance to do something fundamentally different. I think that if you don't support this kind of bill, you are really ignoring that same exhortation in our national anthem to be a firm craftsman of your fate. This is a chance for us to do that, to seize it, and to move forward and to change things. So I support this bill. I think it's bitter medicine, but it has to be done to get where we're going. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm obliged.
Mr. President, this afternoon and this morning, we are discussing the merits or demerits of the proposed income tax legislation. My colleagues have discussed the pros, the cons. We've heard it, a Robin Hood piece of legislation. We have heard Senator Cummins quite passionate about the standard of debate and keeping the focus on that which is important. And that has been my refrain from very early. So I have no difficulty with that. As usual, Senator Adams comes with that tone, and he tells you, listen, y'all relax, everything's gonna be all right. Just hear what I'm saying, it's gonna be all right. He has that tone. He's very optimistic, he has a great tone. When he speaks, it's fine. Whatever, it's fine. No, don't. On a point of something, Mr. President, they interrupted me and it has to do with Senator Grant as always. Then we have, who I wish was here, and I wish her all the best, is Senator Drakes, because she brings that measured viewpoint from the economic and economist point. I haven't heard Senator Boyce. And we had Senator Moore, who spoke to the social element. And everything is relevant and everything is important. We need to debate. That's what the Senate is for. My issue, Mr. President, as usual, and I'm saying it again, unashamedly, is the process. The seriousness of what we have to do in the Senate, because we are going through an economic recovery, transformation, stabilization, dictates and demands that this House is put in a position always to be properly informed and prepared for these debates. And to insist on that is not to say that it is your intention to be obstructionist or in recent times opposition because you want to do things properly. But you must be in a position to do things properly so that when we as a Senate approve a bill, we can rest comfortably with the knowledge that we were given sufficient time to analyze, ruminate, speak to those who know about the area, so that when we say yes, we are comfortable that that which has been put to us is something that for the people of Barbados is a good thing. Because the intention of the government, no matter what it is, however honorable, however the intention is to make things better, it is our duty to make sure that it is correct, that they did the right thing, to analyze and to make sure that everything lines up. It cannot be expected that just because that's the intention and it came from government, that this Senate is to rubber stamp it. This senator certainly does not wish to be in a position to be rubber stamping, and I'm going to keep saying it until it is done properly. So I say again, and it concerns me because I see a pattern developing which I would implore the government to address. We had a similar situation, Mr. President, with the Barbados Water Authority bill. It was mentioned in the budget in June. We got notice of it July 28th or 29th. We debated on July 30th for something that was to be passed on the 1st of August. And then we had legislation that had, and I believe the government admitted, some issues. I was told it would be returned to the House of the Honourable Senate by October. It has not come back. My profession and the level I am at in my profession does not allow me to comfortably and properly say yes to legislation that is flawed. And if it is that it is not going to be brought back to be fixed, that makes it worse. Mind you, Mr. President, you should not have legislation passed in July that you need to be amending in October of the same year. That oven by itself is flawed. But better repair it than to let it go ahead flawed. So we move forward to this legislation. Mr. President, we were notified of today's sitting on Saturday evening. And I believe that's when I received my email, and that is what I believe everybody received. And that email said we're having a sitting. It did not have an order paper. And let me just say for the record right here and now, on the 12th of December at 4:15 p.m., I am casting absolutely no aspersions on the Office of the Clerk of Parliament, because they cannot notify until they have something to notify us about. So let me make that very clear, please. I'm not casting aspersions. The reality is that at the time that we were notified of today's sitting, there was no order paper, Mr. President. Good. I got notice of what we were debating yesterday. Now, I am not an executive senator. I do not do Senate full-time. I was late today, Mr. President, because I was in court. I believe I can say court anyhow. Good. That's what I do for a living. I am committed to serving the people of Barbados in the Senate, but it must be reasonable and it must be realistic. We get the order paper. Lo and behold, we are doing not law, we're not doing culture, we're not doing English, we are doing income tax, central bank, housing, income. I didn't even know there was a place called income tax, central bank, fuel tax, Mr. President, and cloths. But for the presentation of Senator Greenidge, I wouldn't know anywhere about where cloths is in St. Lucia. I thank you, Mr. Greenidge. Senator Greenidge is next to Greenidge's. You understand? But for me, for where it come from, it could well be in St. Lucia. You understand? No, I'm not making fun of St. Lucia, but the point is, not one single one of those topics is an area that I can easily look at and relate to without more. Do not tell me, Mr. President, that the notice was sent out before, because we don't get 1 or 2 notices. We get 10, 15, and 20. So until you know of that which we are going to be debating, you really cannot properly prepare. This particular sitting concerns me though, and I'll say why. We're notified on Saturday. We get an order paper yesterday. Yesterday, Mr. President, was the 11th of December, 2018. But the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance gave her budgetary proposals, delivered her budgetary proposals, as I recall, subject to correction, on the 11th of June, 2018. The 11th of June, 2018. June, July, August, September, October, November, December. That's 6 months. If my memory serves me correctly, and I stand subject to correction, the taxes, for example, for this legislation, were to come into effect with effect from the 1st of August, 2018. So from the 1st of August, 2018, taxes have been collected pursuant to what we are seeking to pass today, August, September, October, November, from 4 months ago. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, Mr. President, because somewhere along the line, someone had the wisdom to allow taxes to come up before it is passed in the House. And the wisdom was the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act, Chapter 85 of the Laws of Barbados, Mr. President, is brilliant. Take the taxes from August, ratify it in December. Fine. My challenge as an attorney, however, is the satisfaction of Section 3. And I read, Mr. President, with your leave. Subject to this act where the imposition of a tax or an increase in the rate of an existing tax is contained in any budgetary proposals, then from the date specified by the minister in such budgetary proposals, hereinafter in this act referred to as the specified date, 1, the imposition of such tax shall be as effective as if an enactment had been made or passed imposing such tax, and the tax shall be payable as from the specified date. So, the government good? Be good. 2, the increase in the rate of the existing tax shall be effective from the specified date, and the existing tax shall be payable at the increased rate as from that date. Good. My problem, Mr. President, is what comes next. Subsection 2. Any tax or increase in the rate of an existing tax which becomes payable pursuant to subsection 1 shall cease to be so payable if the appropriate enactment for the imposition of the tax or for increasing the rate of the existing tax is not made or passed within 4 months of the day on which the budgetary proposals are made to the House of Assembly. Now, I don't know if the Prime Minister spoke on June the 11th, if we're going from the budgetary proposal, I'm just saying if it would have been June, July, August, September, October. If we're going from August the 1st, which is the specified date, August, September, October, November, December, 4 months as of today. Why are we doing this, Mr. President? Again, the Honourable Prime Minister spoke on the 11th of June. It is not for her to get the legislation to the various houses. Why are we in here on December the 12th to the minute of the 4 months to pass legislation that if we don't do it today, it ceases to be effective according to this legislation? We did a similar thing with the Barbados Water Authority bill. We came in here on July 30th to pass a bill that, according to the Barbados Water Authority, was going to be effective from the 1st of August, 2 days later. Why is this Senate being put under this type of pressure? It is not good enough, Mr. President. The very nature of what we are being called upon to do, because ministers can't sleep and Senator Cummings bawling and people are upset, and it is a serious thing. Retrenchment is a serious thing. Sending people home is a serious thing. What the government has to do, or what the government says it has to do. BERT is not a joke. We cannot continue to treat these bills like what we're doing is a joke. And I will reject anyone who suggests that because you want to look and query and understand and be comfortable that you are an obstructionist, you are opposition, and you are just saying no. Nobody's saying no to anything. I am insisting that as long as I'm in the Honourable House, the Senate, that I will insist that things must be done properly. It is not reasonable for in one breath for you to say we have serious business to do, and on the other hand, we are running in here with a piece of legislation that if we do not say yes today, there's a problem. And it cannot be that because the legislation only requires a simple majority, so the government senators are undoubtedly going to say yes, that is enough either. Because there are 11 government senators that have a vote, but there are 9 other persons in here who also have a say. And collectively, we make up the Senate. So if you want things to be treated seriously, they have to be treated seriously. We are under the wire under caps 85, Mr. President. Seriously? For something that was said on the 11th of June? Not good enough. I would have liked to have an opportunity to confer with an economist, a financial person, not necessarily to see if what we are doing should be done, because it doesn't matter if we feel it shouldn't be done or not, we're not going to do it. But I would have liked to be in a position that if it shouldn't be done, that I could tell y'all that it shouldn't be done and why. But I tend to stay in my lane. But you know, y'all ain't gonna try this with a lot of legal things. No things that I could speak to straight, y'all ain't gonna try this with, you know. You see how we had law revision and reform and y'all adjourn? Y'all adjourn. I spent half an hour telling y'all what's wrong with it. But y'all come with income tax. That if y'all don't pass it today, when are God stop taking out people's taxes? For true? That's not good enough. We cannot continue, not we, I wait for y'all to send me things. Y'all cannot continue with that. It is not good enough. Today is the 12th. This says 4 months. So depending on how you count, today is the day. Well, you see, that is a matter of interpretation, Mr. President, because if it's 4 months from the budget, 4 months from when? Well, you know what, Mr. President? I'm getting some assistance from my colleagues. If it's supposed to be 4 months from the budget, the government out of time. If it's 4 months from the specified date, today is the deadline. However you look at it, Mr. President, it is flawed. I ain't say so. There is a whole piece of legislation that gives the government 4 months to get it together. Get it together. We need it. We have to transform. We have to stabilize. We have to recover. It is important. Y'all are retrenching. Send it home. Bring it back. Send it back home. You know, you have Senator Moore out to all for 2 months, and we can't get this very important legislation here on time. I have a fundamental problem with that. And y'all are developing a pattern. BWA, and now this, let me please go on the record, Mr. President. Every time it happens, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. Hopefully, it will resonate where it needs to resonate. The Prime Minister is not at fault if she spoke it in June. She does not draft legislation. Whoever needs to get it together needs to get it together. We're all supposed to be working on it together. We're to join together and work for the betterment of the country together. I am not in here to rubber stamp. I am not rubber stamping. And when you require my vote and you don't give me time to review, I'm not voting. Because after there's life for me after Senate, and as a Queen's Counsel, I'm expected that when I say yes to legislation, I can stand by it. I am not going in any matter with the President and be ashamed because the legislation is wrong when they make him a judge. I'm not doing it. Realize I turn my eye looking so. When he becomes, I'm not going before the President when he's a judge and the legislation is flawed. Because I will have to take whatever he tell me and sit down and hush, Mr. President. So, and I believe too, Mr. President, it is these technical areas that demand even more notice. You see the road traffic bill? That is easier because you can see it because you drive. So it's more relatable. Water, you can see it because it's relatable. Income tax and central bank and fuel tax and what the place name in St. Louis? Cloughs? It demands better administration. It demands it. It's not a request, it's a demand. I have the right to demand that I get information in a timely manner, not only to review it personally, but if I feel the need to confer with someone who is an expert in the area, I need more time than half a day. It is unacceptable. And if you are in the other place, churning out and churning out and churning out and churning out, and because nobody and then ask you nothing, not up in here, I am going to ask. I am going to ask. If it's not clear, I'm going to ask. Asking is different from saying no. Asking is different from obstructing. But if, because it is not clear, I have to say no, I will also say no, Mr. President. Because you can't say no to something that could be rubbish. So then, whether or not I support this legislation, Mr. President, I believe I will finish saying my prayers when I sit, so that by the time it comes time to vote, I will know what the Lord tells me to do. Because right now, Monique in the flesh don't know what to do. Because Monique in the flesh ain't had time to look at it properly. Saving except, thanks to Senator Moore for reminding and highlighting, the waivers are a good thing. And the simple interest, don't even ask, can't talk about simple interest, I know nothing about that. That's mass, so I like Mr. Senator Franklin, I can't speak to that. What I would say though, before I sit, Mr. President, is that I have colleagues, I have friends who because of the 5% so-called increase, they were put into a different income bracket, and then the tax has them getting less money than what they were getting before they got the increase. Seems to me that something is also wrong with that. You should not be getting less having been elevated. You should either stay or get more. So it almost seems as if you're trying to trick people. Let me give you a little increase, but I can also put you in a different bracket so that you're coming home with less. Because all of us are in this together. There's something flawed with that too, Mr. President. With those very passionate words, I'm obliged to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Coming on the heels of my fellow colleague, I rise to bring a different angle to the debate, while of course sharing the concerns which have been expressed time and time again about the notification. While I do enjoy reading legislation, and as I was telling some colleagues in the office, is light reading, all things considered for what we do, sir. To allow the healthy and rousing aspects of parliamentary purpose to function, more time would be appreciated. So to those that have ears, let them hear. Taxes, along with death, are the only certainty in this life. And taxes, we are missing Senator Maxwell and Senator Holder, so I will take the realm or the burden of bringing a somewhat biblical reference. We all are familiar with the quote, to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. In this case, render unto that which is the government. And we recognize and understand the rationale for the proposal. The high debt to GDP ratio. It's the highest that has ever been, and the need for the critical adjustment. From my perspective, this is government policy. Government policy within the realms should be put forward and supported in accordance with the accepted conventions. Personally, if I had to adopt a political label, I would see myself as center-left. Now, I don't understand what that means fully, but it tends to be that I accept personal responsibility for where you can control things and believe in a strong sense of social responsibility in areas outside of your individual control. In other words, my personal belief in social responsibility means I am happy to pay my share. I have benefited from free education at the University of West Indies. I recall my father telling me quite emphatically, "Thank God you be free." I have benefited from the care and attention that was allowed in the free meals at Erdeston. I don't know why, but I was in the line to get the milk and the biscuits, and the milk had different flavors and colors, and there was also days when you would get the milk dropped off and you get to fix it according to your style. So everyone in Barbados benefited from the taxpayer dollars which were utilized to feed those who needed and those who did not, but everybody benefited. And invariably, when you have a situation in which you have such a center-left perspective, you will find yourself on occasion with persons who are benefiting who do not necessarily need the benefit. However, it is better that those who do not need it get than those who need it be deprived of it. And that's the philosophy which should guide the government in going about its activities. So I'm happy to meet the government step by step as suggested by Senator Cummings. And in so doing, I would urge the government to consider as soon as possible, and we have seen that they have kept their promise in relation to the pensioners and should be commended for that. So in this instance, I am hoping to hear from the government side some promises in relation to these taxes which are going to be imposed. I will be greatly comforted if some promises were made in that regard. In other words, can an alternative be found than this increase in the band of payee, or we like to call them PAYE personnel, who have borne the heaviest burden because they're the easiest to tax? You have a pay slip, so the government takes its share. We understand the efficiency of it, but these persons who are subject to pay as you earn taxation also carry the burden of the consumption taxes which have been increased. So we are drilling and mining the same well of individuals, and it may be that the government may find itself in a position whereby you're taking blood from stone. So I'm urging that some consideration be given as soon as possible to a modification as quickly, or a deduction as soon as possible, in relation to the income tax bans for individuals. Now, if deductions cannot be given, I don't want to age myself here, but young persons today don't have the benefit of which I had when I came out to practice. When I first started to practice, I was allowed to invest in the credit union, I was allowed to invest in mutual funds, and I was all allowed to invest in IPOs, the few that were available. For whatever reasons, these deductions have been removed. I understand the government need to get the revenue in, but can some consideration be given, especially when we think about the youth of the nation, for similar incentives to be reintroduced. We hear about the cost of land. We heard that extensively this morning from Senator Springer et al. And the fact that by providing housing, government will seek to alleviate the horrible job done in the past 10 years and the Mickey Mouse houses, etc., etc. If we are saying that things are so expensive, in the realm of property, can incentives be given for these young persons for tax credits in that regard? And if we're saying you cannot afford a house, maybe we can give you tax incentives to buy some shares on the stock market. So while you may not have access to real property, you will have access to some form of ownership. We have $8 billion sitting down in the bank, underutilized or not utilized, being held in savings. Can some consideration be given to get this Barbadian economy revving again, to providing some form of tax incentive? So my contribution in that regard is to please, and I'm pleading with the government, can we have some assurance that consideration and perhaps implementation to be given to some form of tax incentive for the persons who continue to be hit with the increased band of payment as the pay-as-you-earn. And the difficulty is understandable. And it's not for us here to determine how that's to be done, but simply we have the easier position of saying that it should be done. The craftsmen who operate in Barbados and provide service to the country, and the other small individuals, the farmers, the small business persons, those who may not necessarily have a PAYE system set up, we need to find a way for equitable distribution and allocation of revenue which are being earned in these areas. Now, how that is to be done outside the realm of consumption taxes, I do not know, but it seems a bit unbalanced that one group in this country is bearing the burden of both PAYE and consumption without the necessary attendant give. So in keeping with the Prime Minister's suggestion, I would urge that we seek to level the playing field, if at all possible, and look at mechanisms which would contribute to that process. Commendation has to be given for removing the compound interest and in allowing simple interest for the debt. I think that is a positive step for persons who owe money to the government. But there were some elements of Senator Franklin's speech this afternoon, which struck home in that, are we leaving money on the table in terms of persons who owe money to the government of Barbados in seeking to waive this amount? I am not opposed to it philosophically, but is it a question that we are not collecting revenue because of lack of infrastructure or resources? And in so doing, by encouraging waivers, do we set ourselves up for future failure by not taking the time now to do the necessary investment into the appropriate structures to ensure that going forward at least, we will be able to continue facilitation of proper revenue collection? So I am in support, but I would urge caution as to how it is implemented and perhaps some explanation beyond what was presented by Senator Moore. And I was hoping to hear this from the government side as to the rationale for that write-off. Certainly, I understand and do appreciate there are persons who would have outstanding taxes. And to Senator Franklin's point about what do you do with a person who has been paying taxes all the while, I then have to speak for Senator Holder and Senator Maxwell about the parable of the workers, which you're all familiar with, right? No, the parable of the workers, Matthew 20, was this chap who owned a field and he went out early in the morning. Around 6 o'clock, he met a group of persons and he said, you go and work on that field. And they gladly went. Around 9 o'clock, he met another group and he said, you go and work on that field. They gladly went. Around 12 o'clock, he met another group. Go and work on the field. They gladly went. And around 3 o'clock, he met another group and he said, go and work on that field. They gladly went. When time came to pay the workers at 6 o'clock, the workers who were hired, this is 6 o'clock in the evening now, the workers who were hired at 6 in the morning were grumbling that the chaps who were hired at 3 in the afternoon got the same money. And what the owner said, well, that has nothing to do with you. I agreed to give you a fair wage for the day's work. And there was no issue with what you're being paid when I told you that you had to go and work the field. So when you find yourself in a circumstance where you see that someone may have perceived in gaining an advantage, Senator Franklin, the good book provides some consolation as to how you should view that scenario. But while accepting that philosophically, it does not mean that we should, as a matter of policy, not give consideration to what we are doing with regard to the collection aspect and how can we ensure that going forward in the future, we do not continue to leave money on the table. And every good lawyer will tell you, and businessman will tell you, you never leave money on the table. Now, finally, it would be encouraging if the government would give timelines for when the rates would be reviewed in relation to the bans that are currently being put forward after they have had time to quid pro quo. Let us hear from the government what would be done for the taxpayers who are currently bearing this burden. And I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on the side of the government in that regard. Mr. President, I do not wish to burden this House any further, and those are my contributions, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Boyd. I now recognize Senator Rudy Grant.
Thank you, Mr. President. I must confess that I did not intend, sir, to speak during this particular debate. But the truth is, after listening to Senator Franklin, I found myself, sir, compelled to speak. You know, when I listen to Senator Tate, I find myself inspired. But when I listen to Senator Franklin, I ask myself, does Senator Franklin realize the challenge that this government faces and that this country faces? Does Senator Franklin recognize that this Barbados Labour Party government inherited a government, sir, essentially, that was bankrupt? Debt to GDP ratio, 175%. Foreign reserves, $225 million. The last, sir, I heard, the foreign reserves are now in excess of $1 billion. In excess, sir, of $1 billion from 225 million. I wonder, sir, if Senator Franklin, when he speaks to matters such as these, instead of criticizing, because it's easy to criticize, you know. I can criticize a lot of things, sir. I want to hear Senator Franklin tell the government of Barbados how, there's a little heckling that's going on, you know. I want to, no, not at all, not at all. I have a lot to say. I want to hear Senator Franklin in this chamber indicate to this Senate what action the government should undertake to deal with the very challenging situation which we have. Because you can get in here, you can criticize anything. But you know what, sir? If you are working for $2,000 a month and you are carrying debt of $3,000 a month, sir, it is not sustainable. And that, in a sense, is the position that we found government in. And a decision was made by the Prime Minister and the government to institute measures to ensure that we are able to bring this country back. And I hear, sir, Senator Franklin speaking about waivers. You know, very often, governments engage in amnesty actions. There's nothing, sir, that's unusual. It happens, sir, even with criminal elements. There are times when a decision is made by the police force to allow an amnesty in relation to guns. It has nothing to do with the friends and family. It has nothing to do with supporting crime. What it has to do with is utilizing a policy that is known to be effective. And the reality is this, sir, you know, that people do face challenges and do have problems. And sometimes you have to give a helping hand. Are we happy? Are all of us happy with the fact that there's a higher level of taxation? The 40%, what I term as a luxury tax, the 40% that has to be paid on taxable income in excess of $50,000. All of us have to pay it. All of us have, sir, to bear the burden. And that is what the Prime Minister would have indicated. And I don't know if Senator Franklin was paying attention to the mission-critical expenditure items. It's not just about criticizing. Senator Franklin must spend some time and read the BIRT program. And he must not simply look to isolate aspects of government policy for ensuring that there's some good news moments for him. He has to speak, sir, in the context of the entire...
Point of order, sir. A point of order. I'm getting tired of this nonsense. This is not good news moments. I am speaking, when I speak here, about the maladministration of this government, not any policy. And I present the suggestion...
What is your point of order?
The point of order is attributing improper motives to me. I ain't going to good news moments. I am speaking to what I see as or maladministration of this country. In news moments...
You made the point, and Senator Grant, so far as he's accused you of attributing improper motives to him, you promise not to do any such thing.
Sir, certainly not. Sir, I believe that it is appropriate for me to have an interpretation of what I observed, not only, sir, in this sitting, but, sir, in other sittings of this honorable chamber. And I believe, sir, that it is important that if you are going to be critical, you do not just pick out a small aspect, but you look at the entire picture. That is important. Senator Franklin represents workers in this country. And I would imagine that when he does that, that when he goes before a labor officer, I would imagine that Senator Franklin would explore all of the facts. And sir, that is all I am saying, that I expect him to explore all of the facts and to speak, sir, to the facts. So to suggest that the government does not know what it is doing is wrong, because the government has laid out a full plan. The government has communicated very clearly what the action would be taken in order to restore this country from the precipice of disaster where the last administration took this country. And I'm happy, sir, to hear Senator Boyce speak about the reintroduction of policies supported by the Barbados Labour Party and removed by the Democratic Labour Party. I knew, sir, that something good was happening when I came in this chamber and saw Senator Boyce in his red tie. I like that tie. Lovely red tie. I like that tie. And I'm not surprised, therefore, that he is embracing some policies put forward by the Barbados Labour Party and that would have been discontinued by the Democratic Labour Party. But so I want to say that with the new measures, it is clear that confidence is returning to the country. And confidence is something that you cannot necessarily measure, but you can see it with certain things that are happening. We have Ross University, sir, that is coming to Barbados. I call Ross University, sir, the largest hotel in Barbados. It is going to bring significant economic benefits for Barbados. We'll soon have, sir, the Blue Horizon Hotel probably restarting. We'll have some other hotel properties like the Hyatt as well. And we are excited with the prospects for growth that we see through the investments that will be coming to our country. But I have to tell you, sir, that I am somewhat concerned with the manner in which financial institutions function in this country. And I have to say that the workers and those of us who have to bear the burden of taxation seem to be confronted with what I may want to term as economic rape by financial institutions, particularly commercial banks. Mr. President, you know, I left school in 1984. That's a few years ago. The first job I had outside of school and working with Grant's group at that time as well was with a commercial bank. In those days, sir, the technology was not what it is today. Someone came in with a check drawn on that commercial bank, and you had to call if it was another branch to find out what the balance was. You had to give an indication as to, or demonstrate or highlight the signature that was on the check in order to have some kind of confidence that you can cash the check. Today, sir, with technology, what happens is that you take a check into a commercial bank, they can look on their system and they can see whether or not the funds are available. They can also look and see if a signature is available. Can you imagine, sir, in today Barbados, in our Barbados, that there is at least one commercial bank charging people to change a check at that same institution? And I say, sir, that it is wrong. It really is wrong. And I'm going to come to that. I'm reminded, sir, of a period in U.S. history. I believe, sir, that it was around the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was a period referred to by the author Mark Twain as the Gilded Age. In fact, there was a movie, I think that movie came out this year. It was created from a book written during, reflecting that period. The author of that book was F. Scott Fitzgerald. The book was The Great Gatsby. It talked about excessive living And it was a period, sir, where there were certain individuals who were able to achieve massive wealth out of exploiting labor, amongst other things. Names that come to mind, sir, Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan. They made excessive monies on the backs of the laboring class. But sir, along came a man by the name of Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. And he became known, sir, as the man with the big stick, or the trust buster. And he used what was the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up the monopolies and to deal with what would have been referred to as the robber barons, sir. And I want, sir, to call on the central bank to ensure that they give good and proper oversight, because I am very concerned as to what I refer to as economic rape being undertaken by some commercial banks in this country. It is not right, and we need to rectify it. No one is saying that you shouldn't pay fees. Sir, when I was at university in Canada, one of my economics courses was money, banking, and the Canadian financial system. And I did a study then on service charges that commercial banks would have charged to customers. And my conclusion, sir, was that in many instances, those service charges did not relate to any aspect of cost. And I have to say that the level of those service charges was nothing like what I see today. It has to stop. And of course, this is a time when everyone is being asked to bear the burden. And if everyone is being asked to bear the burden, then I expect the commercial banks to have a conscience when they deal with their customers. Mr. President, I heard a bit talked about the challenges that we have. I want to reflect on some words, sir, of Martin Luther King. I believe he would have said this back in 1954. Today, our survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. So I want to read it again. Today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. And sir, that quotation is as applicable today as it was when Martin Luther King said it. The reality is that change has to be constantly confronted, but we have to ensure that change is instituted in such a manner that we are able to make life better for our people. I accept, sir, that this is a period of pain. You know, this morning, sir, the reason I was late to the chamber was that the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association had its 4th quarterly general meeting and luncheon. And during that presentation, in my presentation, sir, as CEO, I showed a clip with Denzel Washington. And during that clip, sir, he used these words: ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. And we are not, sir, saying that we welcome these hard times. But what we are saying is that we are committed to ensuring that we put the measures in place to provide for a better life for our people. We are committed, sir, to ensuring that we face the hardships together and that together we come out of this stronger. I want, sir, to call on Senator Franklin to join with us. Don't just criticize. Nothing is wrong with criticizing. Bring alternatives, but join us as together we seek to transform Barbados and to make it a better place for all Barbadians. I'm obliged to you, sir.
President, it seems of late that I have been tending to be the one wrapping up the debate late in the evening. And again, I apologize, but I shan't be long, but there are just a few things that I wanted to comment on. In particular, I was in time to hear the presentation by Senator Tate, and I totally agree with what she has been saying in relation to the lateness of notices and so on, and the time in which we have to prepare for these debates. And I really hope that going forward we see some improvement. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I think that the point needs emphasizing. To speak more specifically to this amendments to the income tax bill, we, of course, it was also raised, although I have a slight difference of view on what Senator Tate said in her presentation in terms of the timing of the requirement for the legislation. My understanding of the provision of Collection of Taxes Act is that the enabling legislation should be brought within 4 months of the budget presentation. Therefore, it would seem to me that by early October, this legislation should have been enacted and be in place. I therefore find it, when I saw the item, paragraph 8 in the bill itself, which is a validation note, I therefore understood why that validation note was being placed in the Act. And it reads as follows: notwithstanding sections 3, 2, and 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act, Cap 85, all taxes purportedly paid and collected at an increased rate pursuant to the Income Tax Act, Cap 73, from the first day of August 2018 to the date of commencement of this Act, shall be deemed to have been lawfully and validly paid and collected. So we are trying to legitimize something which really had expired. And this validation attempts to do it. Now, I am not, I will leave all of the arguments about backdating and of laws and so on, but I really am not in agreement with having to go and make laws, backdate laws, as we are attempting to do in this case. But getting off of that issue, Mr. President, my concern about these taxes, and I wasn't present, unfortunately, to hear all of the presentations, but a concern I have, and it's not about this government or the previous administration or any administration, but all of the administrations through the years have always seemed to, when they're required to raise revenues, it always seemed the easy way, perhaps the more lazy way, of collecting revenues by hitting on the same group of people all of the time. And I refer to the middle class people, because these are the people who are, to a largely, persons in employment and who receive a monthly salary, a monthly wage, and who have no choice because their income tax is deducted at source, hence the PAYE system. The national insurance is taken out. And therefore, they always tend to be the ones who seem to get hit on and beat upon. And of course, they have to pay all the other taxes as well, all the increases in the fuel taxes, the increases in the water taxes. Every other tax the middle class is also burdened with. And I really think that is about time that a serious study is undertaken to really examine the burden of taxation on the middle class vis-a-vis the other sectors in the community. In the community, I don't have the answer, but I rather suspect it will turn out that the middle class in the country is paying a disproportionate share, bearing a disproportionate share of the burden of the taxation. And I think that we really have to start to look at some more imaginative ways. This government has done some creative things so far, and I would really like to see, as they move forward, more of these kind of creative things to try and make sure that the burden of taxation is evenly spread over the population. You don't have to bother too much about the richer portion of the society, because they will always have the opportunity, they have the means and the wherewithal to hire accountants and tax lawyers and various other consultants who can advise them of various corporate vehicles and so on, in order to be able to lessen the burden of their taxation. It is this particular group that I've expressed my concern about that does not have these opportunities. I know it, for example, in the Ernst & Young tax commentary on the budget in June of this year, that, for example, if you and they've done a calculation of assuming an individual making $150,000 annual income. And it shows that for them, on a previous tax, their tax payment would increase from what would have been the present tax of $2,700 to approximately $3,100, or an increase of approximately $400 per month. And that is significant. That is a significant increase in your tax. It is about approximately 15% increase. And so I think that as we move forward, and wherever we can, that government sees how they can review as the economy improves, that government looks to see how they can lessen that burden. And as I said, it's not this government that I'm laying blame on, or any particular government, but we have seen it. You've seen this situation where all of the things like, for example, savings, credit union savings, and so on, which were allowed at one stage as tax deductions, have all been eliminated. And these were you had registered retirement savings plans on which the same middle class, again, could put some money into a registered retirement savings plan, which would help to supplement their pension, the pension from government or wherever. And those have all been eliminated. So perhaps as we move forward and as the government move forward, perhaps you can think of something like allowing a savings plan for education. That in itself may eventually allow government to be able to reduce the amount of the cost to the cost for paying for tertiary education, for example. Because I think that, and I know that this government's policy up to this point, because it was in their manifesto, was to restore the free tertiary education at university. But the truth is that when you think about it, we know that this eventually will have to go. It is not going to be sustainable as we continue in the future. And I think that something like as I said before, some sort of education savings fund or something which you would allow to be deductible as a tax deduction would work for the middle class, and it would also help to take some of the burden off of the government. What is interesting to note is that with the adjustment of these tax rates, we have now reverted to the 2003-2004 income tax rates. Interestingly, that was the last period in which we had an IMF program. So we have really gone back now, like, 14 years in terms of our taxation. And when we were really hoping that progressively we would have been able to lessen this tax burden. So again, I hope that, and we heard some hints, and there's some indication that already the economy is turning around. We've heard a lot about the increase in the foreign reserves, good thing, of course. And so things are happening. I don't expect, and it's unreasonable for anybody to expect that they don't contribute or make a reasonable contribution to the government taxes, because we have all, in some form or fashion, we all benefit. And therefore, we should all expect to pay our fair share. But we need to make sure that it is a more even distribution over the board. I just also want finally to make the point that in another week, I suspect, in another week or two, we are going to be back here to debate some other tax legislation. And it's going to be a situation where I suspect we're going to be asked to debate and approve the significant reductions in taxes for the corporate sector. And I hope that at that time, perhaps some thought, or in the future, some thought can be given to maybe, it wouldn't happen at this time, but sometime in the future, some thought be also given to looking again at the income tax on individuals. Prime Minister, in doing her budget presentation, made the point about restoring parity between income and corporation tax. And she did that in the 2018 budget. They've now gone out of par again. or they will go out of power again. And therefore, I'm asking that the whole regime, that a relook be taken at the individual tax rates, and wherever possible, we try to bring them back more in sync with what is going to happen with the corporate reduction in corporate tax rates. And with that, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Nares. The Leader of Government Business, Senator Lucille Moore, will now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I listened to all of my colleagues today, and I want to thank all of them for their contributions to this debate on this bill. I did understand Senator Franklin when he said that he didn't understand. I myself, Senator Franklin, I'm not an economist or tax expert, so I understand some of the difficulties of maneuvering through complex financial matters. But what I can say is I do agree with Senator Tate when she said that this is not a joke. Because what is not a joke is that Barbados, currently, the debt to GDP ratio is the third highest in the world, after Greece and Japan. Imagine, we are in this position because some persons before us seem to think that the country of Barbados was a joke. They did not treat, as Senator Tate said so eloquently in her passionate presentation, they did not treat these issues seriously. And that is why we are now in this position. No one relishes taxation. I don't think there's a single person that relishes it. But I understand clearly that responsible people understand the necessity for it. Barbados is a country where we have all in this chamber benefited from what this country has given to us. It has given everybody free education, free health care, a standard of living that was unrivaled at one time in this part of the world in terms of our Caribbean brothers and sisters, and countless other benefits. Some have already been named in here, from school meals, I heard Senator Boyce speak about it, and all the other things that we have had and still have. But it takes a certain level of revenue to continue to allow Barbadians to benefit and to progress in their homeland. Having confronted this situation that we have, we are now instituting measures to put Barbados back on a sound footing. There is no doubt that confidence has been restored, Mr. President, in what is happening in this country. We've seen it, we've heard it. Numerous entities, internationally and otherwise, have said so, that we are on the right track. But what that right track entails is some measures that may at times be painful. But the light is at the end of the tunnel for Barbados, as long as we do not allow ourselves to be sidetracked by small, sometimes issues that, yes, they may have effects on people in a larger way, but we have to always consider this country has almost 300,000 people, and we have to always do what is best for the majority of this country so the country can continue to progress. Having said that, I know that these measures in this bill, in this Income Tax Amendment and Validation Bill of 2018, will help us get our house back in order. And that is what's needed at this stage. And yes, I've heard the pleas of perhaps looking at other avenues as time goes on. But we have to do what we're doing now. Because if we do not do this, what will end up happening, we will be in a position like we were in May, where the reserves were at an all-time low. We don't want that. We want Barbados to continue to move forward. And as a result, it means sometimes taking difficult decisions and putting difficult measures in place for a period of time until we can right ourselves. It was asked or mentioned earlier, I can't remember from whom, that why are we having these exemptions and these write-offs? And there is a reason. It would cost more to go after some of those persons that could reasonably be collected. So if it's going to cost you more, you can't just go after it for the sake of going after it. And the information was incomplete. A lot of the information that we have is incomplete. Barbados here, in my view, in December 2018, is operating not in the 21st century in many respects, but in the 20th century. And because our country for a period of time has not really progressed as it had been doing for a very long time before, we find ourselves in a situation where we have to take that type of measure because too much time has passed. And because of that, you will get these types of write-offs and concessions given to this situation. At this point, Mr. President, I would like to move that Your Honor now leave the chamber. Oh, I would like to move that the bill be read a second time.
Serious? You go ahead. I got a lot of things to do. You can imagine me with your officer. He can call for the way back in the States. If he called for that, anything is
Senator Moore? Senator Moore?
Aye.
Senator McConney?
Aye.
Senator Springer?
Aye.
Senator Grant?
Aye.
Senator Cummins?
Aye.
Senator Sands?
Aye.
Senator Adams? Senator Franklin?
No.
Senator Wiggins? Senator Boyce? Senator Moore? Senator Tate? Senator Nurse? Senator Maynard, sorry. Senator Maynard? Senator Nurse. Your Honor, Senator Greenwich. Mr. President, the results of the division, 14 honorable senators voted in favor and 1 voted against.
The clerk has just provided us with the results of the division called for. 14 honorable members voted aye and 1 against. No.
Move that it goes into committee now.
Move that we go to committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now absent myself and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill before us. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. We are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
The question is that Clause 5 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 6 stand part.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 7 stand part.
The question is that Clause 7 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 8 stand part.
The question is...
Mr. Chairman, I will renew my long-standing objection to this validation clause. This Senate cannot pass this thing legally unless it amends the Constitution. Right now, you are taking away people's property without due process of law. The law that gave the government the power to take away your property is the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act. And that gave you 4 months from the date of the budgetary proposal. The budget proposal was in June, July, August, September, October. After October, according to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act, these taxes should cease. So they shouldn't be taken any last month. And further, the money that was already paid should have been refunded. You have actually taken people's property now without a law in place to do so. That is taking away people's property contrary to the Constitution without a written law or without due process of law. You didn't find everybody in Barbados who is paying a tax. So this validation clause, sir, is contrary to our Constitution. It says within the date of the budgeted proposal. Section 4. Section 3.2.
The question is that clause 8 stand part. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that you now report to His Honor, the President, of the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor, the President, the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The divide is called.
Stand the voice. Stand the voice. Stand the voice. Senator Moore.
Aye.
Senator McConney.
Aye.
Senator Springer.
Aye.
Senator Grant.
Aye.
Senator Cummins. Aye. Senator Sands. Aye. Senator Adams. Senator Franklin.
No.
Senator Wiggins. Aye. Senator Boyce. Aye. Senator Moore. Aye. Senator Tate. Senator Tate. Senator Tate. Division, we're calling it. Senator Maynard. Aye. Senator Nurse. Aye. Mr. Chairman, the results of the division. 13 honourable senators voted in favour and 1 honourable senator voted against. So, the motion is passed.
Motion is passed.
Somebody had to adjourn. You know you can get through this time.
The chairman has just reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do no pass and be cited as the Income Tax Amendment and Validation Bill 2018.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be so cited. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no.
No.
I think the ayes have it.
Divine.
A division is being called for.
Yes, that's true.
Senator Boyce. Thank you. Senator. Senator Moore.
Aye.
Senator McConney.
Aye.
Senator Springer. Senator Grant. Senator Cummins. Senator Sands. Senator Adams. Senator Franklin.
No.
Senator Wiggins. Senator Boyce. Senator Moore. Senator Tate. Senator Maynard. Senator Nurse. Your Honor, Senator Greenwich. Mr. President, the results of the division: 14 honorable senators voted in favor of the motion. 1 honorable senator voted against. The motion passed.
Clerk has just reported the division. 14 honourable members voted in favour of the passage of the bill and 1 against.
Order number 7. In the name of the Honourable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Number 2 Bill 2018.
I thought this was the fuel bill, not it?
Which one is it?
Not the fuel.
No, Central Bank. Mr. President, I rise. Mr.
We suggested that we wait for 10 minutes. We suggested.
No, I keep going. Mr. President, I rise to lead off the debate on the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Bill 2018. Mr. President, it's government's intention to amend Section 7A of the Central Bank of Barbados' Act, Cap 323C, to allow the minister responsible for finance to have some degree of flexibility to transfer securities issued by the government as deemed necessary under prescribed conditions. Currently, Section 7.4 of the Central Bank of Barbados Act states, and with your indulgence, I would like to read it: the minister, notwithstanding any provisions of this act, shall cause to be transferred to the ownership of the bank non-negotiable, non-interest-bearing securities issued by the government for such an amount as is necessary for the purpose of preserving the paid-up capital from any impairment whenever, in the judgment of the board, the assets of the bank are less than the sum of its assets and paid-up capital. As all members here are aware, I think we've said this numerous times in here today, Barbados is facing a financial crisis of unprecedented severity. And the public sector's indebtedness has grown to an unsustainable size. So, in response to this crisis, the government has been forced to implement broad-ranging fiscal adjustment measures, Mr. President, and to seek financial support from international financial institutions, and many of them are been well spoken about, such as the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the Inter-American Development Bank, and to pursue a comprehensive range of restructuring of Barbados's public sector and public sector's indebtedness. The government has recognized that in order to fulfill some of the fiscal adjustment measures, a number of related matters may now have to be addressed along the way. And Mr. President, one such matter is the amendment of Section 7.4 of the Central Bank of Barbados Act, Cap 323. This is deemed necessary, Mr. President, which is deemed necessary, Mr. President, in order to provide the minister responsible for finance with the plasticity, the flexibility to determine when and under what conditions the transfer of these securities would be deemed necessary. The Act, in its current form, makes it mandatory for the minister to automatically comply with a request from the board of the Central Bank of Barbados. As a consequence, it is felt that this current financial crisis, this automatic transfer, would go against the tenets of government's restructuring program when it's intended to place debt in a sustainable trajectory over the medium to long term. So it is against this background that this amendment is being proposed. We have seen and spoken about all day the dire straits that Barbados is in financially. I don't think that there's anyone here who is not aware of it. We have been commended, as I said, I think early in the day, for our approach to trying to make adjustments to rectify some of what we are facing. In an ideal world, we would not be here, but this is not an ideal world or situation. And so the amendment to this central bank bill is an absolute necessity for us to continue to do what is needed for our restructuring of our economy so that our country can continue to progress and move in the right direction and allow for the continued confidence by investors, by business persons, and by just Barbadians in general that we are taking our country in the right direction towards fiscal responsibility. And with that, Mr. President, I move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those
Aye.
against, please say no. I think the ayes have What is in favor of that? Those who are not going to. I think we need to go into committee now.
Yeah. Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for the consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now absent myself and the Senate into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think we are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Beg to move that clause 1, stand part. Beg to move that clause 1, stand part. Beg to move that clause 1, stand part.
I beg to move that
Clause 1.
stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. President, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
No, that you now report the passing. That you now report is the passing of the speaker.
Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has just reported to me the passage of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the bill now be read a third time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be passed and be cited as the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Bill 2018.
The question is that the bill before us do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the bill is now being passed.
Mr. President, order number 6.
Okay.
Order number 6, Mr. President, in name of the acting leader of the Senate to move the second reading of fuel tax bill 2018.
Mr. President, this bill, the fuel tax bill 2018, is a bill that too is necessary. We have spoken on aspects of this bill in here previously in other regards. One will remember that during the presentation of the budget proposals and financial statements by the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs and Investment, a number of revenue-raising measures were announced, including the following proposals. Mr. President, the abolition of the road tax was replaced with a more efficient fuel tax, and the imposition of a fuel tax, Mr. President, to be levied at a rate of 40 cents per litre of petrol, 40 cents per litre of diesel oil, and 5 cents per litre of kerosene. Subsequent to the announcement, Mr. President, the Fuel Tax Bill 2018 was proposed. The core amendments of this provision of the bill are as follows, Mr. President. At Clause 3, it provides for the imposition of the fuel tax, the rates of which the tax will be charged, and the method by which the rates may be amended. At Clause 4, it provided, Mr. President, for the payment of the tax by the importer. And at Clause 5, it provided for the penalty and interest to be charged for failing to pay the tax. And at Clause 6, it provides for inspection of a warehouse by an officer of the Customs and Excise Department. At Clause 8, it provides for the payment of the tax into the consolidated fund. Mr. President, this particular bill is another important one in our exercise to what I would like to term physical fitness for this country. The fuel tax bill is one we have spoken about before, and we know that this is an absolute necessity as well in order to ensure that Barbados and the government of Barbados and the people of Barbados are given the opportunity for this country to once again be what we knew it to be at one time. It gives us an opportunity to ensure that we have the resources to continue to provide all of the things that we all have benefited from over the years in this country. Barbados is on the road to recovery, and we do not want at this point, and should not do at this point, anything that would put an obstacle in that path. It is an absolute necessity that we look at this bill and understand the significance of its importance in allowing us to continue to do what is necessary to put this country back on a sound economic footing. And with that, Mr. President, I move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't be very long. I'm just seeking some clarifications. I've spoken on this matter already, and I've heard or seen nothing that would want me to change anything that I've said about this legislation previously. This measure, we were told that there were 20,000 vehicles or something like that on the road not paying road tax. And that in order to get these people paying some money into the treasury, we will put that tax on the gas and the fuel that is used by these vehicles. I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. I called it a money grab then, and nothing that I have seen or heard so far would suggest to me that it is not a money grab. You see, the government knew, everybody knows, you just check with the Department of Statistics, and they will be able to tell you how much fuel is imported into the island. So you can do a quick calculation and see how much money you're going to be getting from this measure. So that looked good. Had nothing to do with no 20,000 cars on the road and any compliance with paying any tax. because we have a measure where you put a sticker on the right-hand side of the license plate to say that you have paid your insurance. Now, you could have gotten a sticker to put on the left to say you pay your road tax. So it ain't got nothing to do with that. It just had this was a measure to get money. And it has been criticized around the country. But as I said, sir, I'm not going into all that detail right now. Everybody knows my feelings on this bill and on this measure, this money-grabbing measure. In the schedule to this bill, we have something called illuminating kerosene and diesel oil for use as fuel for road motor vehicles. I do not know what they are. Illuminating kerosene means that there's only kerosene that you can put in a lamp. You know, I don't know what that is. And if it is, if I buy kerosene oil to wash down something, I don't pay the tax on it. Because it says illuminating kerosene. It's for illuminating purposes. I don't know. You know, and then it says diesel oil for use as fuel for road motor vehicles. Weed whackers use diesel or whatever, I don't know. Or other equipment use diesel. Are these pieces of equipment not going to be paying that tax? And how are we going to know that it's used for one type of vehicle and not the next? So I think this is just another way of confusing the issue, you know, making it look as though we are doing something. Mr. Chairman, that's my concerns. I want these things explained. It seems wrong to me. It seems like they're making fools out of us. And if, in fact, that is what they're doing, but they might have been succeeding, because everything in this country now is reached a stage where if the government says it's for Bert get anything he needs. But, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I suspect that this measure, the schedule is flawed. Thank you, sir.
Senator Grant.
Mr. President, again, I must confess that I did not intend to speak.
I'm making you talk.
I thought that this was a very straightforward piece of legislation. And I believe in another place that the Minister of Finance would have spoken comprehensively to this. Again, sir, I think it is important that the entire picture is looked at. I am not sure where the figure of 20,000 cars came from. I'm not sure. I certainly haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in the reports that I have. But, sir, we have to remember as well that the NSRL, which was abolished, would have been responsible, I believe it was for 12 cents per liter on gasoline and 11 cents per liter on diesel. The expectation also, certainly as related by the Minister of Finance, was that this tax is not expected to put any greater burden on persons than what they would have been previously paid, ranging from, I believe, sir, $300 to $1,600 in terms of vehicles. I think we also have to remember that there is a provision which still allows for commercial vehicles to pay a registration fee. I believe that fee is 50% of what they would have paid previously. So I'm not very clear on what it is Senator Franklin again is talking about, but I just want to reiterate the fact that this particular piece of legislation is once again, as the acting leader of government business indicated, to facilitate the better operation of the collection of taxes. It is as well, sir, as all of us would know, going to provide for persons who may not in the past have paid road tax now to be paying something in relation to the fuel tax, because if you have a vehicle and it's operational, you do have to put in gas in order to operate that vehicle. So, sir, I stand with those few words to give my support to this bill and to say that there is no expectation that there will be a burden on Barbadians with respect to this bill, but that persons will, at the end of the day, not be burdened with any excess in terms of taxes. Certainly, it is not expected to be greater than what persons would have paid before in relation to the previous new road taxes. I thank you, sir.
Unless there are any further indications of anyone wishing to speak, you can move that we now read second time.
Mr. President, as we have thoroughly debated this bill before, and so I don't think we need to continue to debate it. And I can assure my colleague, Senator Franklin, that this is not a money grab. What we know for sure is a money grab is if we read our daily newspapers and look at reports and see what has occurred within the last few years, and we see where money was being grabbed all around Barbados. It is certainly not in this instance. What I would like to say, Mr. President, at this stage is that I would beg to move that Your Honor now leave the chair and that the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Second reading.
Oh, I now move that the second reading of this bill.
The fuel tax bill before us be read a second time, sir. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not upset myself, and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in detail. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. We are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. President, I beg to move, Mr. Deputy President, I'm sorry, I beg to move that, Mr. Chairman, that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
The question is that Clause 5 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 6 stand part.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 7 stand part.
The question is that Clause 7 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 8 stand part.
The question is that Clause 8 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 9.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 9 stand part.
The question is that Clause 9 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 10.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 10 stand part.
The question is that Clause 10 stand part.
Mr. Chairman, I will never get tired of pointing out the validation clauses in these bills. The government has no legal right to do what it's proposing to do. I've made that submission a little while ago. I don't want to go and hash it up. I just want it on the record that Senator Franklin has objected to this.
Your concern is noted and will no doubt be recorded. The question is that Clause 10 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 11.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 11 stand part.
The question is that Clause 11 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 12.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 12 stand part.
The question is that Clause 12 stand part. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the
Schedule.
schedule.
You would say the schedule. And then, yeah, no, you would say that.
You can say.
Yeah.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule, Senator Franklin?
Mr. Chairman, I was hoping before this thing is passed that my questions were answered. What is illuminating kerosene oil? Or what illuminating kerosene? And if you buy kerosene that you're not using for illumination, do you pay taxes on it? I do not know. It is not clear. And also, sir, it says diesel oil for use as fuel for road motor vehicles. So if you are, you have a generator home and you want it, instead of using, you like the power stuff, you use yours. Is this, do you have to pay the tax? That is not clear to me either. Because so far everybody's been paying on the diesel. There's been no exceptions. But now this schedule is making some very fine distinctions. And I would want it clarified before this thing is passed. What are we paying or what the country is paying toward?
At this stage of the proceedings, I believe we can only know that.
What is illuminating kerosene? I mean, personal for land. So we're cooking with it.
Leader of government business.
Mr. Chairman, I will endeavor to provide the answers to Senator Franklin's queries at the next sitting of the Senate.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. We do no report.
Mr. President, I beg to move
Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do no report to His Honor the President on the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be passed and be cited as the Fuel Tax Bill 2018. Fuel Tax Act 2018.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time and be now passed. Be so cited. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
We commit. Mr. President, we commit announcements by Your Honor.
We have to revisit the item announcement, as I've just received notice of a letter from the Private Secretary to the Governor General, to our Clerk of Parliament, Mr. Frederick Eastman. And it says, "Dear Sir, I have the honor to inform that Independent Senator Reverend Michael Bruce St. John Maxwell has tendered his resignation as a senator and has vacated his seat in the Senate according to the provisions of Section 47(1) of the Constitution, with effect from the 1st of December 2018. Yours faithfully, S. Watkins, Private Secretary to the Governor General."
You finished for the day?
Is this the end of business for the day?
Finished for the day? Or you got something to say?
11. At least twice before. These measures have a limited time frame. Can you be found there? Where can you be found? We'll come to you.
The first time we see it, this is the first time we see it.
No.
I will hope so. I will hope so. But I come here that kind of Christmas week and all kind of.
Yeah.
You got that? You got that?
You got that?
Yes, I do. Mr. President, that concludes government's business for the day. I move that we adjourn the Senate until next week, December 19th at 11 a.m. And I just want to say, in conclusion, that today is the birthday of two of our colleagues, Senator Adams and Senator Dr. Maynard. And so I don't know if they're the same age, but they have the same birthdays.
I'd like to rise. And please allow me the indulgence, Mr. President. The reason is that I think both Senators, Adams and Senator Maynard, should be commended for spending their birthdays with us. Because these two gentlemen have such wonderful alternatives than to be here. And I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the fact that they made that sacrifice.
We were happy that, are happy that both senators shared their birthdays with us. It indicated that they could have done other things, but their sense of service and commitment to the country required and demanded of them that they be here, and they were here. Continue to enjoy the balance of the day.
I don't know.
The question is that this Senate be now adjourned until Wednesday, the 19th of December, 2018 at 11 a.m. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We have now adjourned until next Wednesday.
Oh, Lord.